Dear Biker, this incident occurred in Jonesboro, Arkansas on September 30th, 2025. As I was walking home from the store around 9 p.m., I noticed some movement in the light spilling across the lawn of a house that was at the curve of the road. Well, at first, it only caught my attention, but I quickly realized that there were no headlights or traffic behind me to create any reflection. I kept watching as I walked, and then sure enough, it shifted enough for me to make out an outline. Now, I would estimate it was about 3.5 feet tall if I had to guess, maybe 100 to 110 pounds if it were human. There were no eyes or facial features, just a distinct silhouette, kind of like a dark figure moving in the dark, but almost entirely crystal clear, with just a faint haze surrounding it. I even tried to get my wife, who was walking with me, to see it, but she couldn't because of the glare on her glasses. We kept walking, and the creature seemed to follow close by, sometimes even beside us. During the rest of our walk, I spotted about 4 more of them. One even made a bush shake in a well-lit area, which let me see it clearly and confirm there was no animal there. That one appeared to be the tallest, standing around 4 to 4.5 feet tall, while the smallest was just under 3 feet. They seemed to have a purpose, and they showed no fear. They were quick and quiet, almost like they were quiet by choice. A day or so earlier, while walking my dog, I also heard what sounded like people running up on me through the leaves. More often, it was more than one person, or so it sounded. Very close. But when I turned around with my flashlight, there was never anything there. If squirrels were making those noises, they'd have to be some record-breaking size squirrels. I noticed that as long as I spotted one at a distance, I could keep it in focus until it got really close, about 1 foot or 2 away, at which point it would become completely invisible. I also believe the angle and intensity of the light helped me see them. In the bright light, I would have no luck at all, but dim yard lighting, especially when filtered through a neighboring tree, seemed to be just enough, especially with the little distance between them and the light. Thanks for reading. Signed, CJ. Dear TB, well, I live in South Texas, about 5 minutes from the Mexican border, specifically in Mission, Texas. One day I was out riding my bike for exercise along a series of dirt roads that connect my mom's house to the Rio Grande River. You know the one that separates Mexico from the United States. I'd taken this route many times, and there was usually little to no traffic or other people around, so I was always alone. This particular experience happened in broad daylight as I was headed back toward my house. I was about 2 miles from my mom's house when I glanced over my shoulder, and there I saw someone dressed in white, possibly sweatpants and a sweater, jogging behind me on the dirt road in this rural, undeveloped area. I instantly felt a surge of panic. I was so used to being completely alone out there, so I pedaled a little faster. But just a few moments later, I looked back again, and instead of a person, I saw something that resembled a wolf or an Alaskan husky. It was like the person I'd seen earlier had transformed into a completely white dog. I pedaled even faster and turned around one last time, but this time, nothing was there. Even so, my heart was racing from the experience. I was convinced that something had been following me in a place where I usually felt entirely alone, which itself was deeply unsettling. I've been back there since, but I've never experienced anything like that again. Thanks for reading. Signed, Paul. Hey, biker. Now, I'm going to have to be a little vague with this story, and please don't use my name in the email. Just call me Ranger Rick here. A couple of years ago, my boss told me not to share this publicly or specify the exact location, but since he no longer works at the park, I figured I could finally share a vague version of what really happened. I know at least one coworker listens to your show, so hopefully they'll be cool with it. While working at a state park, one of my less enjoyable duties was manning the non-emergency phone line. Calls would range from reports of trash on the trail or advice to avoid getting lost, sometimes suspected homeless people camping in restricted areas, or hunters out on the conservation land. That's how this call started, but trust me, it didn't end that way. Now, this particular call came from a private landowner whose property bordered the park. It was an area miles from any public trails, and not even your worst lost hiker would ever end up there. Well, they were reporting hearing strange noises in the woods out behind their home. And the husband claimed he had seen a figure walking into the park property from his back deck. They suspected hunters, but noted something odd. There was never a flashlight, no campfire, nothing. Well, later that day, I asked a fellow ranger to join me in checking the woods out behind the property. We'll call him Roy here. We figured we'd find a trail camera, or unfortunately, a homeless encampment. We hiked into the park's property for about 10 minutes, and there were no signs of any human activity. No trail cameras and no corn piles. No fresh trash or beer cans. And just as we were about to head back, that's when Roy saw it. A massive structure made of branches. Now, I teach wilderness survival, and in my time I've taught how to make lean-tos, A-frames, even cabins, but this was unlike anything I'd ever seen. It was 3 huge domes connected by small tunnels, woven entirely from sticks and branches with nothing artificial tying them together. At first, we weren't creeped out, just really impressed. That all changed when we looked inside. No trash, no food, no handmade bedding, nothing, but a bed made of branches and leaves. Now, the next part might upset your listeners. When we called the park manager to report what we had found, he immediately ordered us to destroy it. We tore this entire structure down, and both Roy and I were kind of upset about it. We even joked about using it as a campsite ourselves. Well, I'm glad we didn't, because what happened next shook me to my core. The following day, we were sharing the story with some coworkers, and I, wanting to impress a certain female coworker, took her on a hike out to the area. We drove the Polaris to the property and hiked back into the site, only to find the massive structure rebuilt in less than 18 hours. It was back, exactly as it had been. Well, that freaked me out, and we quickly left. And here's the part that might get me in trouble. We never told anyone that it had been rebuilt. Thanks. Signed, Anonymous. Dear Tattooed Biker, I may seem out of my mind, and sometimes I feel like I am. The first night I heard it was at the end of summer in 2019. I was building my own art studio at the back of an old building. One night, as I stepped out onto the back deck to clean up, I stared off into the woods next to the stairs leading up to my studio. And that's when I heard it. An immense, deep howl, far in the distance. But it cut through the air like nothing I'd ever heard, raising every hair on my body. Seconds later, it went silent, and I mean dead silent. And then suddenly, every dog within a mile or two started barking, yipping, and howling, all in the same direction. There's no way it was a wolf or a big cat. I've heard recordings of wildcats and mountain lions making those demonic sounds they make. Well, this wasn't that. This was a roar. It sounded half human and half animal. In my part of Ohio, you just don't see big cats, let alone hear them. My first thought was, that's the Wendigo coming for me. Now, I don't even know why that thought popped into my head. 4 weeks before this, the weirdest thing happened. A man approached me about commissioning 3 pieces of art. It was something I wasn't familiar with at all. He wanted Wendigos. More specifically, a wartime Wendigo. He imagined a huge creature made of us, like human body parts sticking out everywhere, faces here and there. He said to represent the greed and insatiable desire. Well, I didn't have time to take that commission, but it reminded me of a monster that's followed me my whole life. I'd drawn it in a nightmare just a week before that man had approached me. Well, in my dream, it was a tall, emaciated creature with animal-like legs and human-like arms, crouching in my kitchen, like a dog, but rifling through cabinets. "What are you doing?" I asked it when I came in there. It just said, "Chill out, I'm looking for chips or something. I'm starving." I bolted upright and I threw my blanket off because I hadn't said that out loud. It turned to look at me. The way it looked is indescribable, but I took in every detail I could. Large black holes where his eyes should be, a jagged slit across its face for a mouth, and rows of jagged teeth curling around its gums. It had a long tongue that slid out of its mouth, and then it let out a gurgling, squelching scream. Black smoky tendrils shot out from where the hair should have been, lingered for a second, and then sucked back in. And then suddenly it vanished. Well, I tried to draw this thing as soon as I woke up. Every hair on my body stood up when I realized that I still had an unanswered email about commissioning artwork based on that same thing. Well, fast forward to June 2020. COVID had taken over the world, and I was sure I'd lost my mind. I'd forgotten all about it. Around 3 a.m., I was hanging out with a friend after months of isolation, and we decided to run to White Castle for a quick bite. She walked out first, hitting the bottom step while I was still locking the door. And that's when I heard branches snapping. Something was moving through the trees. Not slow, but not fast, but definitely noticeable. It was coming from high up and getting louder as it descended. It was like something was swinging from branch to branch. It reminded me of the sound a gorilla might make or an orangutan. I tried to shake it off, telling myself I was crazy, until she turned around quickly, looking up into the trees, saying, "Did you hear that?" I noticed then that the air itself felt heavier, thick with fear. I came down the stairs and she stared upwards. I glanced and I could see the branches moving. I yelled at her that we had to get out of there, and I pulled her toward the car. We turned our back to the woods and then, thwack, something slammed into the ground right behind me. Every hair on my body stood up. It felt like it had hit with a log or a massive branch. I stood paralyzed. The air seemed to grow even thicker, pressing down on me like it was crushing every inch of my body without actually touching me. It hurt so badly that it brought tears to my eyes and made me shake uncontrollably. It was hands down the scariest moment of my life. We sped off to White Castle, both shaken to the core. And when we came back, we kept the brights on the car, pointed at the woods for a good 20 minutes before we even dared go inside. The only weapon I had was a golf club. Later, she told me that she had seen it, high up in the trees. A creature with strange features. She also told me a story from her teens when she thought a huge owl had tried to swoop her off the back of a motorcycle. Months later, I remembered hearing somewhere that these things feed on fear. Now I don't know where that thought came from. It's almost like something else was telling me. Well, since then, a lot more weird things have happened. I've pieced together what I can, but a few weeks later, something else happened at a friend's house, and well, that's made me vow never to set foot in the woods again. I'll save that one for my next email. I just wanted a little feedback on the story. Listening to your channel and hearing countless others sharing their experiences has helped me finally put this out there. Thanks. Signed, Dom.
He's got skulls on his arms, flames on his chest, rides a steel horse, won't ever rest. Chasing whispers through the foggy pines, searching for truths that slip through time. Moonlight bends where he rolls, the shadows speak. They've got souls, inking shadows, leather and lore. He's knocking on the other world's door. Bigfoot's howl, dog man's glare, man in black just vanishing there. Inking shadows, truth to find, paranormal trails in his mind.